conducting diplomacy via leaks to newspapers, and that too not Canadian newspapers, but to American newspapers. Is Canada not at all interested in maintaining any sort of ties with India? Look, I understand the maximum chunk of students who go to Canada for higher studies, 40% of them are Indians. Our trade with Canada is huge. The fact also is that, yes, there are 8 lakh Sikhs in Canada, the largest diaspora outside of Punjab, but the diaspora, Indian diaspora, is way more diverse. Where is this love, such deep love for Khalistanis coming that you want to completely wreck your relations with a country that you've been cordial with for a very long time?
Well, first of all, let me say that you were absolutely correct in saying that Justin Trudeau has taken the relationship with India into unchartered waters. And that we might have reached a point of no return because, as you say, all the 3 main candidates who appear to be in the run for the prime ministership are hostile now to India. There was a lot of hope that if there was a conservative government, then it would try to reverse the damage. But as per present indications, because of the cancellation of the Diwali function, even that seems an unlikely possibility. So, in other words, my assessment is that Justin Trudeau has destroyed India-Canada relations because of his childish, in fact, juvenile, short-sighted, and immature vote bank politics. I think that India-Canada relations have now sunk very low and are hitting rock bottom, especially after these allegations, this news has surfaced that Canada's national security advisor and the deputy foreign minister had leaked some information to the Washington Post alleging that an Indian minister was behind the assassination of Niger and the targeting of Sikhs in Canada. Now, let me mention, this planting of the story was not done accidentally. It was done deliberately. And it was done because they wanted to tarnish the image of the government of India. The result is that because of what I call these juvenile policies, the relationship has sunk to an all-time low. And I don't think it is going to be at all easy to rescue it from where it has fallen. Mr. Ujjal Dosanjh said that the 2 sides have been friends and they can sit across the table and sort out these differences. After all, India and Canada are not at war. But what is happening is as bad as war. This is a war of sentiment. They've played with the image of the government of India and they've tried to damage this image. Let me also mention that Justin Trudeau has made Canada a hotbed of Khalistani politics directed against India. Let me also say that Sikhs are among the most loyal and patriotic sections of India's society. However, there are a handful of exceptions who are extremists and who have carried out terrorist activities here within India as also in Canada. And what has happened is that many of these extremists have fled to Canada with the help and connivance of the Canadian authorities. They have been given visas on one pretext or the other.
Okay.
And in Canada, they have been given shelter, they have been promoted, and their activities, which are directed against India, have been encouraged by Justin Trudeau's government.
Pathikrit Payne, which brings me to an interesting question and something I just noticed or thought about when I heard the ambassador speak. We are now accusing Canada of what we once accused Pakistan of, harboring terrorists. That is where the relationship is now.
Yeah, so Shreya, we should call them Canadian terrorists and American terrorists instead of calling them Khalistani because they have Canadian passports. And that is exactly what Canada has reduced itself to. And we must also understand one thing, it is highly unlikely that Canadian government is doing it for just a few 100,000 votes. It is not so. There is a far deeper conspiracy going on. And you would see that the calibrated approach, as I mentioned, is going to go up. They will do far more as and when they see that a country like India, which has created this voice of global South, which is actually leading this global South, which is having this strategic autonomy, which is hitting them, and they will keep on doing it. So, let me tell you one thing. The entire Northern American this cabal has always promoted secessionism in other countries in the name of activism. It is not something new, and that is one of the reasons why you see after the Arab Spring that happened, many of the Middle Eastern Arab monarchs are distancing themselves from the Americans. Because of this, because of what they promote in the name of freedom of speech, in the name of dissent, is nothing but armed violence. Look at this. Indian government gave evidence of Canadian Border Service Agency employee. That person was involved in the killing of a Shaurya Chakra winner in Punjab whose name was Balwinder Singh Sandhu. And where is it? And let me tell you, Canada has become a de facto Pakistan base, and all is happening with the blessing of their big brother, which is just below them geographically. So there is absolutely no difference between the Americans and the Canadians.
Dr. Swasti Rao, do you second what Pathikrit is saying? That it's not just Canada. Canada is shooting its missiles in the dark because it has the backing of the US. And it is at the US's prodding that perhaps Canada is doing what it is doing. Do you believe that as well?
Well, Shreya, it is. I know this is a very popular kind of an understanding about how Canada is shooting above its weight and why is it and how is it being made possible. But frankly, if you really see how geopolitics has changed, I see very little evidence of why the US would do it. Because if the US is serious about focusing on Indo-Pacific and all the other if you look at the last 1 decade and all the different foundational agreements, all the different change in their in their policy, and their strategic trade authorization, every single thing, and regardless of which administration has been in place, right? If you look at that carefully, all the recent developments with respect to technological innovation, all of that basically show that if the US pivot in Indo-Pacific towards Indo-Pacific has to work out, has to have any success, it has to really be focused on an empowered India. So this is something which is very counterintuitive, okay, if you look at how the US pivot to Indo-Pacific has worked. And that is why I also mentioned that the Five Eyes themselves, if you look at the declassified papers from Trump era in 2019, there was an Adam Schiff committee that actually said that if the Five Eyes, considering that the Western pivot, as in especially the US under Trump administration, had shifted its focus, from CENTCOM to PACOM and renamed PACOM as Pacific Command and as Indo-Pacific Command. They said that they have to support the in US pivot to Indo-Pacific and engage in more cooperation with 3 specific countries, the report said, and the 3 specific countries were India, Japan, and South Korea. Okay. So, looking at it from that perspective, we know that none of this is going to work if the focus on India, because of our geographical location in Indian Ocean, is compromised. So, then it would be very counterproductive for what the US has been doing. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, with respect to intelligence, I think there's another thing that doesn't really catch a lot of attention when we are discussing that aspect, is that, if you really understand how the Canadian intelligence agencies work, please note that the Canadians do not have independent external intelligence agencies, okay? So what they have is that they have internal intelligence, but they don't have, in a similar fashion, they don't have external intelligence capabilities, and they are rather dependent on other partners, which is the Five Eyes partners. And that is why the kind of evidence that they've been furnishing is basically a raw kind of information, like a raw input, because if you look at the nature of how those intelligence inputs are gathered, they are gathered about everything and anything. And then it is incumbent upon that particular party to actually then translate it into hard evidence. And precisely the kind of a problem that India has, because let's remember, if you go by what the Indian government has said and not the commentariat, okay, if you go by what the Indian government has said, the Indian government has been forthcoming about the allegations made by the US, because the evidence presented